Welcome to the Water People podcast. I'm Lauren Hill, and my co-host is Dave Rastovich. This episode is presented in partnership with Who Gives a Crap. They deliver recycled TP to your doorstep and donate half of their profits to help build toilets and improve sanitation for those in need. Today we're in conversation with one of surfing's inaugural Olympians, two-time world champion John Florence. Our podcast comes to you from the coastal land and waters of both the Bundjalung and Gubbi Gubbi nations. We'd like to acknowledge these traditional custodians and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We'd also like to extend that respect to all First Nations people this podcast ripples out toward. John Florence is pretty much widely understood as one of the most inspiring high-performance surfers today.
Yeah, John's easily every grommet's favourite surfer. His technical skill is unrivaled. He can do the highest airs, the fastest searing turns, charges huge waves, loves small waves, rides anything in terms of kinds of surf. And is also just a very creative person, in a world where world champs have had to historically be singularly focused in order to win. John is a bit of an anomaly that way. He has so many other interests, and I feel like that's probably what drew us towards him more than anything, is that there is a water person element to John that encapsulates
so much more than surfing.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting, and it's also really impactful, in my opinion. I feel like as a kid that grew up in a very one-dimensional surfing world where, in the 90s, early 2000s, it was just high-performance shortboard surfing and everything else was ridiculed or not even acknowledged in our public conversations or media. And now here you have John, who has won by all measurements in the traditional competitive ways, but he also goes sailing and hangs out with 80-year-old surfing legends like Joey Cabell and other members of the Hawaiian surfing community that are not necessarily just, the sporting contest surfing people.
There's a real thoughtfulness and curiosity about John that I find really compelling and interesting, and that was definitely why I wanted to have him on the podcast.
Yeah, he and I and a couple other folk went to a little remote spot in Australia a year or so ago, and it was a quiet place where we could just watch some wild ocean and sit in the strong wind and be quiet and just observe the place. And, he had a really strong pair of binoculars and was scanning the coast the whole time and happy in his own skin in such a quiet way, which was really refreshing, coming from a pretty outward and extroverted mold when it comes to pro surfers, in order to get sponsors, in order to keep them, in order to avoid a 9-to-5 job. A lot of professional surfers are pretty out there and, loud and big personalities.
And often single-dimensional.
And so that time with John was really wonderful because, one, we got to slink off down the beach when we saw, 4 or 5 other surfers at one end of the beach, and we're like, oh, quick, let's hide from them and go down the other end of the beach. And he was just he was so up for that. And that's pretty much what I do at all times. So that was really nice to experience that with John. And then just to see his absolute comfortability in the ocean tells a lot about someone. Like when we first met, I could see so much in you, Lauren, in your surfing, your relaxed stance, your gentle shoulders, your gentle hands, but this also very competent, very skilled ability to nose ride and ride longboards. And I think surfing is amazing that way, where we get to learn about each other without speaking. We can see it in each other's stance. You see it in the way people act in the water, between waves, on waves. when they're getting pounded by waves, when there isn't any waves. There's a lot to learn from each other in that way, which is really refreshing because it's non-verbal. We live in a very verbal world, and John is someone I feel that really loves diving deep into the ocean and all of her moods and all of the ways to be there. And just like he says, and I can back it up, he will stay in the water all day. And I've seen him do that in Hawaii all the time, but also when we went on this little trip, we were both just marathon surfing all day. And it was really wonderful to see that kind of deep dive. And it doesn't surprise me then that he also does that on land with other pursuits, because you see that in people surfing. You go, oh, yeah, that's how they would act, in a restaurant. Or, oh, yeah, that's how they'd act with their friends or their relatives or whatever, Very insightful space to be in. And he's an incredibly accomplished water person because of all of that water time.
Yeah, it seems like he spends as much time in, around, and on the water as maybe anyone in the world. So it felt like a real privilege to get to talk story with him a little bit and hear about some of his oceanic adventures outside of the surfing realm. And what a real privilege.
Yeah, I feel like his experience is really impactful also because of how much he is adored by the surfing world, and especially by kids who are coming up, growing into and out of this surfing world. And for them to see someone who's humble, very, very humble, and quite gentle and quiet, but masterful in the ocean, and is interested and diversifying his interests, which is really healthy.
To hear about his beekeeping and growing food, and that was a really beautiful thing to know, that his surfing is obviously first and foremost in his life, but there are all of these other interested and interesting ways that he's engaging with life.
Yeah, there is a lot of wisdom there for such a young person. And I feel like that can happen when you spend so much time in the ocean with your eyes and ears wide open. You can really soak up a lot of perspective. You get thrown, like he was saying, he loves big waves, and that's probably the biggest teacher for him, is going surfing in big waves and pivotal moments in big waves. That experience puts a lot of other things in daily life into perspective, places them well, and I feel like the surfing world is really fortunate to have someone so idolised be so humble and sweet and curious and as wonderful as John.
John, we always begin these conversations with water people by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a moment like this that you'd be willing to share?
A single moment, I can't say like there's like one defining moment, but my life is I feel like has been built up by like a bunch of little moments that I can think back on. And a lot of them have been, mostly in the water. My life has been based around the ocean, but for the most part, I guess the ones that have changed my outlook or just made me overly excited about just being with my friends and stuff have been in big waves. For some reason, the big wave stuff is always super meaningful. Every time we have a big wave session, whether we're paddling out, it's I don't know, there's just a feeling about it that it's hard to match it with anything else in life. And so I have a handful of sessions in big waves that here on the outer reefs, where it's just my brothers and my friends, and we're just oh my gosh, we're going out, and I can just see those sessions so clearly in my mind.
Are they sessions that you have and then you come in and they last with you, they linger for a long time and you think back on them, and there's moments within a session that just sort of stay with you, or do they pass pretty quickly?
No, they stay with me. It's kind of where I get my confidence from in big waves. I guess whenever we have a big swell, I think back to those sessions when it was really fun and the whole setting was a really good energy. I kind of draw off of those experiences for like big waves. When we have a big swell coming out, I'm really nervous. Like I think about those ones and I get really excited about putting my gear together and getting our whole little crew together and figuring out where we're going to surf.
I know for Lauren and I here, like she comes from Florida where they measure the waves in like 6-inch increments and a bombing swell is head high. And I come from, the east coast of Australia where we have a handful of bigger days a year, but certainly not as many as you all get in Hawaii. And when we talk about it, like the peak moments for her are different than the peak moments for me, but kind of the feeling for us after those moments is similar, where you get, you just said meaningful, you have like a meaningful moment, among the play.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
I just feel like that those sessions are, it seems like the best ones are always the ones that kind of surprise you a little bit. And when I say meaningful, it's like a surprise, but you're so there in the moment. You're so like, just, I don't know. It's so hard to explain because I think of sessions when like, sometimes when I go out to pipe, for example, and the waves are really good, but you have this crowd and there's a lot of different pressures going on there. And so you kind of get into like more of a competitive mindset or something along those lines. But when these other sessions happen and the waves are big and there's a lot of consequence in the line, like and you're with your friends and it wasn't really like expected, I guess. It's easier to fall into the moment and be in the moment and be there. I'm trying to explain it the best way. It's really hard to explain.
It is for everyone.
Which is why it's so good. I think that's an indicator of the power of something, like when you can't wrap little words around a big feeling or a big moment is proof that it's special. It doesn't fit easily.
And I think that goes to a lot of sessions too. Like I have a lot of little sessions that are unexpected for me, where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to jump in the water. It looks really nice out. And you jump out there and you end up having these sessions that are just so much fun. Like you're just enjoying it, every bit of it. And those sessions, just become so meaningful.
There's such a broad spectrum of feelings and approaches to wave riding, so many different sensations to explore. And I've experienced over my surfing life that I've explored and chased after different sensations. I grew up really loving the subtlety of longboarding, and now I'm much more interested in going faster. I was really interested to know, your approach to surfing is often defined by speed, but which sensations are most compelling for you right now?
Speed is, I love just going really, really fast on a wave. There's this wave right by my house right here, and it's, you just take off when it's really big. It's kind of everything that I love about surfing. You take off on a wave that's pretty big, but it's an easy takeoff, and you are on a smaller board and you just get going so fast. And there's not a lot of waves like that where you just can get in on such a small board, but then you're just up and going. And the feeling of doing like the big rail turn going that fast is, I don't know, I kick out of waves like cracking up to myself like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how fast I was going. I get so excited. For me though, that's it right there. It's just like when you're being pressed into your board like that, going really fast, it's hard to beat that.
All right. Well, I think I see a little bit of a thread through a number of your pursuits, and it sounds like speed is one of them, because sailing is obviously a big part of your life, and that is largely based around speed. And then flying too. You got your pilot's license when you were injured at some stage?
No, I didn't end up getting it. I went pretty far down the class, and then I started surfing again, and then
we can relate to that. Totally. But that would have been a sensation of speed. Was that something
Definitely.
in that?
I think it's speed, but the efficiencies of it too, which is what I love. Like it's the feeling of, when you're flying, like you're going fast, and it's the efficiency of flying. And then when you're surfing, it's for sure, how it is when you have that right board that you feel like the rail just really tracks well on a turn, like where you're using your whole rail. That's like the feeling to me, like the efficiency of that is what I like put my mind to. And it's kind of the same with sailing too, is like, I'm always thinking, whenever we're sailing, I'm always thinking about like, okay, just like another half a knot, like, okay, like what can we do with the sails here? What kind of angle are we at here? Like always just kind of playing with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like I often refer to that as trimming the fat. You're just trimming little pieces here and there. How do I get away with as little as possible to receive as much as I can?
Yes, exactly.
and like, it's funny because in surfing, like with boards, I ride twin fins. I've always ridden twin fins. Akila Ipa and I were doing 20s on really bladey little boards in Hawaii whenever I'd visit. And it was pretty much always my approach to be on the edge of disaster. I liked being like right on that edge where a board is going to blow out at high speed, but it doesn't. And his boards were and are amazing at dancing that fine line. And then with sailing, I went on a little sail with a friend a couple of weeks ago in these little Hobies, and we got pitched in these waves and broke rudders, broke like the outrigger pieces, and then I had to fix everything up and then figure out a way to get home. But that was one of those moments where it was right on that edge and we were pushing it because it was fun, and then things went pear-shaped and we fixed them and then we limped home. And anyway, all of that made me think about with you. I had a chat with Jack Johnson the other day, and we were chatting about sailing, and he was talking about a time where you all were on, I think it was on your boat, one of your bigger boats, and you had Joey Cabell on the boat.
Yeah.
And for people who aren't familiar with surfing history, who are listening to this, Joey is a pretty serious elder in the surfing world, like a bit of a monster of a waterman, a great sailor, great surfer, and, revered in the generations older than us. And anyway, he was on your boat with you, and Jack was saying that he was pushing your boat further than what you were comfortable with. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Because I thought it was pretty awesome.
So like I had just gotten the boat not too long before that, and we had done a couple of outer island trips, but nothing really major. And it's a 48-foot catamaran, so like you can push them pretty hard and get going fast. And that was always my thought, was like speed. I just want to go fast. Like I just want to go really fast. And because just learning how to sail like on the Hobie Cat, like how it is, like you're saying, pushing that edge, like you always feel that edge and you're just going faster and faster. And so I was thinking of doing that I want to do that with the big boat, but once things get bigger, it gets really scary. There's a lot of pressure. But so that was a race. That was a race that had come up, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's do the race. And so we got an epic cruise. Jack, Joey Cabell, I think Kai Lenny was there. Like we had such a fun crew. But Joey, it was my first time ever like racing or anything like that. And so we're like going, I'm like, okay, we'll start with one reef in the main and just use the jib for like kind of coming across the east side. It's like a reach. And we're like going, we're doing like 10 or 12 knots and everything feels pretty good. And then Joey's kind of like standing there and he's like a little bit like bothered looking. And you guys know Eric, and Eric's like, Joey, how's it going? You all good? And he's like, are we cruising or are we racing? We got to get the main up. We got to get the main all the way up.
Awesome.
I was like, okay, like I guess so. Let's do it. And then so we put the main all the way up, and when we turn the corner, you kind of fall off and go a little bit downwind towards Kauai, and the race is towards Kauai. It's like a 120-mile race, and we were just flying. We put the spinnaker up full mainsail and had like maybe like 30 knots of wind, and we were doing between 18 and 25 knots the entire way. And Joey was just loading the spinnaker up so much. I'm standing on the back corner of the boat when he was driving, and the mast is just like flexing at the top, and I'm just like waiting for something to happen, like for something just to explode, because he would load it's pretty amazing like how well, I mean, he's 80 years old and he's sitting there at the helm of the boat and reading these lines. Like there's crossing the Kauai Channel, there's pretty big lumps in the ocean out there, especially when it's windy like that. And he's driving the boat up and then just peeling off and dropping down these waves going 25 knots. and just all by feel, just loading the boat up. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so gnarly. Like, it was terrifying. But to see him just double-handed on the wheel, just driving the boat like that it was a pretty incredible experience.
I bet. And so did you say he's 80?
Yes.
So he's 80 and he's scaring like 20-year-olds.
Yeah, I was terrified.
That's so great.
As two people who love speed and really pursue the sensation of speed, for you, is it about presence or is it about disappearance? Like, do you feel like you love it because you're in it fully, or because it kind of dissolves you into the experience?
No, I think I'm in it fully. Like I feel like when you're going fast, kind of like what Dave was saying earlier, how when you're right on that edge, you're riding that edge. And when you're going fast, it just feels like you're pushing yourself up to that edge. And whether you're doing a big turn and air, or just lately I've been having a lot of fun just getting a ton of speed down the line, and just like a high line speed run and just coming down into something. Like, doesn't matter what it is, but that feeling is like, like just having that much speed is there's just the feeling about it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. That's actually the only move I have in my repertoire is that high line. I've trimmed it right down to, I used to just have a high line and a cutback, and now I don't even do cutbacks. It's just straight.
Just the high line.
Yeah. You're too young. You're too,
place.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. The point breaks only allow for that. Well, I wanted to jump back for a second, John, about Joey there, because I've been really fortunate in my life where I've had older mentors. You know, like when I was a kid, I had a great family and everything, but my dad was pretty crazy, and he was a very intense character. And I was really lucky to have an older lifeguard friend and an even older surfboard shaper from Burley Heads on the Goldie take me under their wing. And then it really, for me, that experience really taught me the value in seeking out perspective from older people. So just multi-generational experience, you know, like being able to learn a lot and not have to reinvent the wheel with every interest that I have, you know, just pursue some of these older characters or just more experienced people to help along the way. And I was curious about that. Like, what role has, you know, older surfers or older sailors or older people in your life played? Have you got any people like that you feel are mentors?
Definitely. I think, you know, here on the North Shore, just so many amazing like surfers and stuff that I've looked up to my whole life and that have really like helped me along the way, you know, from a good friend of ours, Pete Johnson, to John Feisel, who, you know, just been family friends forever. And then to people like Joey Cabell, who, like, for me, like, talking to him and asking questions was always so interesting to me, because I've found such like a love for sailing too, and a love for so many different parts of the ocean, that it's kind of become more than competing in a way. Like, so being a part of the tour and competing and being there, it's really hard to find a balance of what you're doing. Cause like in order to be there and doing it, I feel like you have to be there full on. Your mindset, everything has to be committed to it. And if you're not, it's not very fun. And so I've had, in the past, had trouble balancing that, of like, I really want to go sailing and go search for good waves and just have fun and learn and do different things. But I also like doing the competing thing. It is fun. Like, the mental side of it for me is really interesting. But it's kind of a hard world to do both of those. They both take up so much time. So Joey was someone, though, who has done both in his life, from competing to building his own boat and sailing it to Tahiti. And I think he still has like the speed record from Hawaii to Tahiti on that boat.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
Which is,
and I think the largest,
what is that?
I don't know. I don't know exactly. I couldn't say, but fast, super fast. And hearing his stories of him and his friend, if you saw the boat, because he still has it today and he goes out almost every day on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. But the boat is like, it's pretty much, it looks like a giant Hobie cat, and it just has like this, like a 20-foot Hobie cat, and the deck has this like little just covered area, and that's it. That's all your living space. And the stories of them just pulling into like passes in Tahiti and just scoring waves is incredible. For me, that was just like, I want to do that so bad. And then, but just hearing his stories of how he would just, would put energy into focus and competing for so many years, and then started going off and doing these other things more often, kind of helped me, I guess, see it like there's enough time to do both, but maybe not completely at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, that's the wisdom of someone who's been there and lived that, which is so great.
Yeah.
That you have access to that. How did that come about? How do you get to hang with someone like Joey? Is there introductions through other older cats that are friends with you all? How does that happen?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how I met Joey, but it might have been just eating dinner at the chart house. They own the chart house in Waikiki down there. And so I think that was how. And then just him and I getting to talking about sailing was really kind of what I think sparked a relationship there. And so that's what's so cool about having these other things, I feel like. And for me, especially, like, sailing has been such a big one, is being able to make these connections with so many different people, not just based completely around surfing or just competing or something. It's a whole nother world of experiences. And so, yeah, but I think that's how we got to really talking.
Speaking of that long lineage of, looking to our elders, I was excited to chat with you about Duke, iconic waterman Duke Kahanamoku. He expressed his dream to see surfing as an Olympic sport during his time at the 1912 Summer Olympics in Stockholm. And now, more than 100 years later, you helped to bring his dream to fruition by surfing, but also by representing Hawaii at the Olympics. You've written that Duke is still the most inspiring surfer in the world. And so what is it about Duke for you that continues to inspire?
I just think the fact that Duke was able to, the time he was in and do the things that he did, going to the Olympics and being an Olympic swimmer and winning gold medals, and also being the surfer that we know of him as today, like, and going to Australia and kind of, I think just the love of the sport and the love of the ocean is what is inspiring to me about it. And being here from Hawaii, you really get a feeling of how that kind of came to be, I guess. Like, it just, life is around the ocean here, whether you're body surfing or you bodyboarding or surfing, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're in the ocean all the time. And for me, that's what Duke kind of inspired. And so, like, whether he was swimming the Olympics, surfing in Waikiki, or whatever he was doing, it seemed like it was really based around the ocean and the water.
Yeah, we just watched a beautiful film about Duke called Waterman. Have you gotten to see it yet?
No, I haven't gone to see it. I heard it's really good, though.
It's really beautiful and speaks so powerfully to all the racial tensions that he would have had to grapple with, which I'd never really considered before. He was a radical in so many ways. And yeah, our culture is so indebted to Duke as someone who took surfing with such love and generosity around the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
John, I wanted to take a little bit of a left turn here, because you're talking about making these connections and, like, meeting people in different circles, and, like, how much fun it is getting to go down another path with people, be it through, imagery and photography or sailing or foiling, whatever interests you may have at the time. But how do you do that when you have classic introvert qualities and you scored, just like me, you scored low on the introvert test probably, or high, whatever it was. How do you juggle that line where, like, we can probably relate to each other, where having quiet time and being lost in our own little worlds of interest is really attractive. How do you dance that line, that edge? Because that's another one of those edges that we're talking about.
Sometimes it's really difficult, but sometimes it's almost, I think that's the reason why I get into so many things, is because it allowed, like you said, like, that, having that little world of something to focus into. I love that feeling of just being lost in that little world, and almost an excuse to just shut everything out and just think, nope, I'm doing this right now, and I'm learning this, and I'm figuring it out. But I also like meaningful conversations with people, like, more about the specifics and depth about certain things, whether it be surfing or farming or sailing or whatever it is, bees, or I get really interested in that and I get really curious. It's just the small talk with a lot of different people at once is like where it gets really hard for me. And it sometimes is super difficult because the tour is where I spend a lot of my life in the last few years. And it's not a very introverted world. There's so much stimulus, like activity going on and stuff. So if I don't find like the right kind of routine and right balance with it, I get exhausted quickly and kind of burnt out on the whole thing. And so I'm still trying to figure it out what the right balance for me is and kind of how much I do let myself focus into things. And sometimes I get a little lost in focusing on those things where I'm like, oh wait, I kind of neglect other things in my life. So trying to figure out that balance.
Yeah. And I think it's a constant sort of push and pull there with that. And I think the interests like bees, you know, when we were hanging out, whenever that was last year or whenever down south, and rapping out about bees and just, you know, the excitement of learning about that living world was really obvious in you. And I was curious to just check in and see where that interest is for you now, and if you still got your hives and if you've got any food growing or any animals, or if that's, you know, a phase that came and went.
No, it's a huge interest for me now. And I'm really stoked because my wife has gotten really, really into it too as of late. And so we've both been, or I've been surfing a lot. She's been doing a lot of the hard work, but I still love it just as much. And it's so interesting to me. Like now we have 6 hives, and just from catching our hives that split. And so they'll split, and somehow I've been lucky at seeing where the hives split to in a tree and being able to catch them. And so it's pretty amazing. Now we have 6 hives, and we still have we have some friends from the west side that help us with the bees every now and again. And so every time they come, I try to be there and just really absorb as much as I can, even if it's something they've told me 10 times over, but I just want to get it because it's such an interesting microcosm. I feel like the beehive, it's crazy to me. And so I've been really enjoying learning that. And then we've been growing a bit of food. Like right now we have tons of bananas. Our bananas have just been going off. We have too much. It's crazy. And then we brought a bunch of citrus put in. And then we have a pretty nice veggie bed, some eggplant, a lot of eggplant, onions, beets, tomatoes, all that. And that's pretty fun. It's just cool I feel like our piece of land in the garden, in a sense, is like life in a smaller area. Like there's just sometimes we have been having pigs a lot lately, and Lauren, my wife, is super into flowers, so she's been doing these huge flower beds, and the pigs will just come in and destroy, like just uproot everything, and it's like this. It's just like, damn it, like you feel so bad about it. You're just like, oh, put so much work into that, but then kind of just accept it, learn from it, adjust, and then move on. And so like we've just been over the last year, just little adjustments here and there. And so like they were tearing up the veggie beds. And so I put this little like metal fence around the whole thing. And then, so now they've not been going there, and now they're going to the flower beds. And so now we'll probably make an adjustment there.
Oh man.
But
you're gonna
cool
have a
learning
compound.
and adjusting.
Yeah, it's I find it really interesting too when like we're in very fortunate positions where we have the resources to go and buy food, and we could go to restaurants and eat food that's prepared by other people and all of that. But we're pursuing those interests of growing and cultivating or harvesting honey, stuff like that. And we're in the similar state now. Like we have a lot of food growing and are sharing it with lots of people. And I'm curious, like, are there many other people your age there doing that? Are you on your own in that way? Or have you got like a community of like-minded people with those interests?
There's definitely a community of like-minded people. Like my good friend Kona Johnson is Jack's nephew. He's super into it too. And then Jack has the whole Kukula Foundation going, and they have started a really cool farm down in Haleiwa. There's definitely a community for it, but as far as like in the main like surfing part of my life, like my surfing friends, like my brothers and stuff, I'd say I'm a little bit alone in that one. Just in like spending so much time up there. Everyone else is just so surf, surf, surf. I'm pretty, yeah, I'm like that, but I like to go do other things as well when I have the time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really fascinating and really healthy balancing acts that we can have with a deeply watery and ocean-centric life. It feels kind of like it's a good idea to balance it out with some terrestrial time as well, you know, being in the soil.
Definitely.
And all of that. And it kind of brings me back to that area before that we were talking about, and mentors and just being with others. Because I feel like at this time, you know, a lot of kids are pretty stressed. There's a lot of anxiety, you know, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of very stressed younger people in the world. And, you know, it's pretty solid evidence to show that getting our hands in the soil, connecting with mycelial networks, you know, earthing ourselves in that little microcosm, like you say, that is so healthy for us. And that balance between, say, the human world and the tech world, like we're doing right now, but also diving into the non-human world, be it through being in the wide ocean or deep in a garden or a forest or something, that they're really necessary things right now. Like that is a pretty smart way to navigate the crazy world we're in at the moment. Do you have those kind of thoughts? Are you thinking, when you say microcosm, do you then zoom out and look big picture and see how that fits into the bigger story at all?
Definitely. I think that being out in nature for me is really everything. It's a thing that I think will get people to want to help like protect it, because you have that experience of being out in it and finding a love for it and seeing how beautiful it is, because it's like a frequency or some sort of when you're like you're saying in the garden or you're out in the ocean and you're kind of just by yourself. It seems like everything calms down, your heart rate calms down, your breathing gets like a little stronger. Everything just gets a little slower in a sense. And I think if you talk to anyone, if they're stressed and they go for a walk outside, you know, for example, they're going to come back and they're going to feel better. And I think just all around, if more people have these experiences and get out there and they just feel nature for what it is, they're going to feel better and they're going to want to protect it. And I don't know, for me, I spend so much of my life in it, and it's hard to convey to other people who maybe some people don't have as much of an opportunity. I'm very lucky, and you guys are lucky of where we live and kind of what we're able to do every single day. So I guess it's kind of a hard one to like tell everyone.
Yeah. But it's obvious, like the benefits, you know, like I feel like the surfing world, especially like the high performance or the sort of the corporate surfing world or the professional surfing world, is full of really high highs, but then also some pretty deep lows that don't really get spoken about much, you know, like
definitely
mental health and just the plunge that happens, especially for surfers who have reached, you know, real heights in sporting achievements, like people who have won world titles. And then you speak to them about, and which is something I've always had a real interest in, is that moment after you've attained that goal, you know, like how did it feel to win a world title and then wake up the next day or start the next year and realize, I've done it. Like, now what?
Yeah.
Can we stop there? How was that for you, John?
I was just going to say that it's exactly what you just said. Like for me, it was like I won my first world title and I was just kind of like in shock almost. And I was like, I think I maybe had a beer down at the beach, and then I just wanted to go back to our house and go surf in front of the house. So we rushed back, and then I just went surfing with my friend Kieran just in front of our house. And that was like what my mind went to doing, you know? And so like, I wasn't thinking about it much. but it was so funny because a week after, it was like you said, the lowest lows. Like you go from the highest high to the lowest low of like, okay, I've accomplished this big thing. Yeah. And now what? And for me, I had like this couple week period of like feeling just super down, and not any particular reason, but just kind of like a little bit lost, I guess. And then the next year for me, I kind of, I don't know what happened, but I like fell into a good routine of competing and stuff. And I won again. And then the low was even lower though.
Oh,
and
wow.
I feel like it was really interesting. And I think at that point I was like, okay, I've done it twice. Like you can do it 3 times, you can do it 4 times, 5 times. Like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? And I think it all goes back to that deeper kind of why you're doing it. And so I've kind of been on this path the last few years of trying to figure that out, along with like going through these injuries and feeling like, where do I want to be right now, sailing or surfing, and it's just been this like mix up of that super high kind of sent me into this like different just thought pattern in life. But I think it was really good because it was something I definitely needed to kind of go through and work through. And then more, and so just trying to figure that out through my life. But I think now I'm kind of coming to a sense of like, okay, like if someone were to ask me like why I'm competing or why I do it, and it's just like, I think it's just as simple as just saying, it's just like, I just love surfing and I want to just dedicate my life to it. Like, I don't care if I have to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and I want to be the first one out. And if I have to go to sleep at 7, like, I just want to be out in the water surfing. And it's funny. I went through this last couple of years and injuries and all these things of like, maybe it's this and maybe it's this. And it just goes back to that super simple feeling of just like, I think I just love doing this. And I think I just really enjoy it. And so in the last couple of weeks, I've been like really kind of just falling into that thought process of it. And I've been kind of enjoying it more than ever.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I was talking with Jack the other day, who was speaking about just Kelly's love of surfing, and people saying, Kelly's just like, ultra competitive, and that's why he's won so much and he's, achieved so much in surfing. And Jack was like, yeah, he is, but he just fucking loves surfing. Like, and then Jack was saying the same thing about yourself and a few others in the surfing circles. And I think we can't, overlook that, because it's a simple way to describe all of this, but it is real, like that deep love of it.
I think like for me, after I won my first world title, like an explanation like that for the why just seemed way too simple. Like there's no way it could be that. It has to be this deep, complex thing. And
often the simplest things, unearth all of these really complex, intricate feelings. I just am thinking of the old and ancient Hawaiians and how the Hawaiians came up with this incredible, intricate culture of surfing. And because they loved it, because it was fun, and it ended up being sport, and it was also art, and it was connection, and it was community, and it was play, and it was spirituality, and it was all of these things. And they, shaped their land culture to some degree around riding waves. And I feel like when you say, I just love it, I think of the people who have been, who were riding waves hundreds or thousands of years before us, who were feeling the same. Like, why do we build a culture around this wave sliding thing? Because it's so fun.
It's just so fun. And there's, I don't know, there's just so much to it.
Apologies for the interruption, but we'd like to take a moment to recognize the generous folks who help make this podcast possible. 2 billion people around the world live without access to a toilet. That means lots of people head to their local beach or riverbank to do their business, which, when you're talking about 2 billion poos or more a day, doesn't make for healthy waterways or communities.
My explorations in activism over the years made me feel like I had to be either leading campaigns or taking part in radical initiatives of some sort to be doing something in the world. Though now, especially at this time where many of us are staying home and localising, it feels really important to look at our daily decisions, and you don't get more daily than making a dirt. And that's where Who Gives a Crap comes in. They are a B Corp that believes that access to a toilet is a basic human right, and they donate 50% of profits to providing proper sanitation to those in need. And that, to me, feels like a great form of everyday activism.
27,000 trees are cut down every day to make toilet paper. We support Who Gives a Crap because they make toilet paper from recycled textbooks or bamboo and plastic-free packaging, so we all have a better option than chopping down trees to wipe our bums. We can all make a difference with as little as our toilet paper budget. Head to whogivesacrap.org and use the coupon code WATERPEOPLE to get $10 off your first subscription. That's $10 off your first subscription purchase at whogivesacrap.org with coupon code WATERPEOPLE.
Thanks to Gary McNeil Concepts, who put together cosmic boards for cosmic people. Gaz's boards combine recycled and plant-based materials that are built to last without sacrificing performance. To learn more, head to GaryMcNeilConcepts.com. John, we have a garden system on the land here that we sort of stumbled into it becoming like a mini version of sort of Hawaiian food growing system, the ahapua'a style. And are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, the ahapua'as are like the kind of zoning, right?
Yeah. And the water, like sort of controlling the water to an extent, or guiding the water down through the valleys.
Working with water.
Yeah. And
working against it.
Exactly. Slowing it down, and so
here we have the signs. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there's it's Ahapua'a and then the name of that area, and it's per stream along the mountains. So as you're going along the road, you'll see them, the little historical Ahapua'a signs. I just thought that was interesting. Yeah. So they defined it by the streams along the coast. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's such a different way of relating to land, isn't it? Defining it by how water moves through it. As people who are, live our lives around water, it always makes me think about how would we live differently if we were shaping our lives around doing service to water or caring for water. And that was getting to the point, Davey, how the system of growing that the ancient Hawaiians developed was really all about how do we work with water instead of working against water.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave, I cut you off there, but you were saying that you guys have kind of set your system up like that, huh?
Yeah. So it's, so in the last year or so, because of the lack of travel and everything, it's been this awesome opportunity for us to really dive into growing enough for the neighboring families and the two of us families living on this land. And so, they're just these big beds and then these little footpaths in between that just happen to fill up with water because we didn't dig the drains right on the end.
Oh, that's funny.
But what it did was it stalled the water from flowing away, and it gave us 9 months of growing food without ever needing to water the garden at all. And
really?
Yeah. And so now we're in November and we've done probably 4 watering sessions in the last month, this is our bushfire season and everything. Yeah. And so we've just been tripping out on that because essentially what we wanted to create was a surfer's garden, basically the laziest garden you could possibly have so that whenever the surf's good, we can split or, you can go on adventures up and down the coast. And so it's really worked. It's really, really worked.
And so where does the water come from in the first, rain and stuff?
So rain, and then I have a header tank, a tank that captures water just higher than it, and then that gravity feeds down if we need to water. But essentially it was just coming from rain and then just being stored. We get a couple meters of rain every year. We get a lot of rain here. Yeah. So that's not so much of a problem. And one of the neat things about that was realizing how surfing, the popularity and proliferation of surfing in Hawaii, it feels like that was deeply linked to the ability to grow so much food that you felt safe, you had so much abundance, that you could have things like the Makahiki Festival every 3 months.
Yeah,
every
that's super
every year
interesting.
you have those 3 months where everyone
Yeah,
surfs and doesn't fight, doesn't work. It's for sport and play and all of that. And you can only do those things. You can only surf so much if you have your food sorted. And that seems
yeah,
to be how things were
yeah,
happening in Hawaii. And that seems for us now what we've been able to do here this year, and that it's created like a sense of success that I've never felt in my life. So I've had a very fortunate life of being able to have adventure after adventure and travel and be very, very spoiled with surfing as a life. And I've been very happy and grateful for that. But growing in this way this year and being able to gift the food to so many people and to feed our little boy and other kids and to fit that into a surfing life has felt like the most successful feeling of my life, like literally just success. And
that's so awesome.
And it's really exciting. I just wanted to share that with you and see if there were any moments where you felt a similar thing with your growing and cultivating.
I think it's so cool to hear that, because like the COVID in general, just being home for a whole year is something that I haven't done in a very long time since I was pretty young. And so just being home and putting a lot of time into the garden, and my wife's just been learning to surf the past years, and now she's good enough to where like we can go out front here. And so in the summertime, it's like there's always a little fun wind swell wave here in front of the house. And so we were just spending like every day in the garden and then run home and go surfing in front of the house. And it was because our garden is on this piece of land that's actually just across the street. So we're really fortunate. We just ride bikes up there, spend the whole day up there. And then you're just so hot and dirty. You're just like, okay, let's go for a surf. And you're just surfing in the evening. And it's the coolest feeling in the world. I don't know. There's something about it that's so rewarding. And especially when you learn all those little things that as you're going on and you see the improvement of everything as you go, as you learn. For me, it's such a rewarding feeling.
Yeah. Dave, you're speaking to kind of an unconventional experience of feeling successful. John, I was wondering, you've obviously had heaps of success by cultural standards, like world titles and this illustrious surfing career already. I was wondering, have you had other experiences of success that maybe are less conventional? Like, is there an experience of success for you that's outside of surfing that you feel?
Yes, for sure. I think that a lot of that comes in sailing. For me, like whether we're going outer island or going somewhere else, like crossing the ocean from one place to another is always feels like just such an accomplishment. And getting to the comfort that I'm at now with it and feeling like I can kind of go from here to anywhere in the world that I want to go is a pretty cool feeling. And it's just like we had a trip this summer coming back from Kauai. We had gone to Kauai for like 10 days and I just took my family. And so when we were coming back, this is like the moment I feel like that kind of defines the whole thing though, is like coming back, and we decided to leave at night because it's like a 19-hour trip home and I wanted to arrive in the daytime. And so we leave at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're sailing through the night and it's really windy and it's choppy crossing the channel and you're going upwind. And for me, I feel a lot of responsibility for everyone on the boat. And it's like, because I'm, Eric's with us a lot of the time, a lot of those trips, and Eric's very knowledgeable, but it's my boat and I have this responsibility of making the right decisions. And so just setting up the sails right. And then I was on my watch at like 3 a.m. and I'm like doing my little check around the boat, making sure everything's good. And we're just pounding upwind, and I go out and I like look up and the whole mainsail just tore across the middle. And I was just like, oh my gosh, no. And so, but it's those moments where it's just like, it's like rough, and you just kind of have to like take a deep breath and go, okay, this is the situation and I'm just going to deal with it the best I can. And just having those moments and being able to go through them slowly, adjust, fix the situation, continue on, and make it back. When you get back, you're just like, we made it. We made it back.
Wow.
So I don't know. Those feel so rewarding to me. And I had one other time that just comes to mind. I was like, I went with just my wife and I on the boat, and it was our first time, just us two taking the boat to another island. And I thought the winds were going to be like 15 knots. And so we like left, and it was nice. And I'm like, this is great. This is super nice. We're crossing the channel to go to Lanai. And we were kind of going slow. So at like 3:00 in the day, we're about 20 miles off Lanai, and the wind just went from 15 knots to 35 knots, like that. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And Lauren, my wife's like starting to get a little bit sick. And so she's just laying down, and I'm just by myself, like trying to manage the sails. And I'm like, okay, this isn't working. We're going to turn around. And then so we're like, tack the boat around, and it's just so windy. Like when it's windy like that, it's just kind of terrifying because you're in the middle of the ocean. It's just you, and it's having big sails. Trying to manage that with one person is pretty scary. But even though we turned around and sailed downwind back to Oahu, and it took the whole day, and got in late at night. But that whole thing, I just felt like accomplished. I was like, okay, we made it back. We're good. We're safe. We went and we came back. We didn't make it, but it's fine. But it's just like an accomplishment of like, okay, I can definitely do that the next time. Like, so I've been finding that a lot within sailing, which I think is why like I have such a love towards it.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And it's such a metaphor. I think the sailing experience is just so rich with lessons that are really easily translated to daily life moments, you know?
Oh, definitely. Every time you go out on the water, it feels like that.
Yeah.
Nothing ever goes according to plan.
Yeah. Well, I love Yvon Chouinard always says that. He says that, you know, it's not an adventure until something goes wrong. And
yeah, exactly.
I took out our buddy Damon, our friend Damon Gameau. He's a filmmaker and a really amazing mind, but he hasn't had a life within the ocean. And I took him out on our little Hobies a couple of weeks ago, and right as we were leaving the river mouth, a crusty old Australian fisherman looked at him, and I'd already started sailing out of the river, and he looked down at Damon and it's just like, mate, you take that thing out in the ocean, you're gonna die. Have a good time. And Damon's like, oh, thanks, mate. And then he actually ran into the jetty. He turned the wrong way.
Oh my god, that's so funny. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then we had like a 2-day trip where I snapped a rudder, we got pitch poled and flipped the boats, and then a wind, just like you were saying, we were meant to have a southeast wind that would just blow us straight home back to the river, and instead we got a west wind that pushes you out to sea.
Oh my gosh.
And so we ended up limping to shore, and I was like, we're not taking food. If we find some seaweed or some bush food in the dunes where we sleep, we can eat, but let's just not eat for a couple of days.
That's amazing.
So we ended up limping in, and the whole time he didn't tell me that the fisherman said that before we went out, but he said when we got back to shore, the whole time.
That's so epic. And so do you take those like down the coast a little bit and camp and stuff, and then bring them back?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, so we did in these little ones, like we went from Byron to Sydney 10 or 11 years ago, and you just come into all the little, like that's like 780 Ks or something. It's a long way, and you just come into all the little nooks along the coast and tuck in and sleep.
That's a mission.
Yeah, it's really, really, really fun and full of so many great insights. You know, I just feel like it's such a wonderful teacher to be out and likewise feeling a responsibility for others and that sense of adventure and everything, and wildness and freedom and all of that, but also with some reasonableness in there. You need to have some rational thoughts, and you know, like you've got to dance that line well, especially when you've got other people under your wing.
Definitely. for me, that's the sense of freedom with sailing. For whatever reason, sailing and free, it just has this feeling of freedom. I don't know if it's because you're being pushed by the wind and you feel like you can just kind of keep going, but that's always something that I've really felt with it.
Do you feel like you are moving towards the ocean and moving towards those great feelings when you go out to sail, or are you leaving the world? What's that balance? Do you feel like you're going, get the fuck away from me, crazy human world, and you have to get out in your boat? Are you fleeing away from, or are you running towards the ocean?
No, I think it's more running towards. It's more this feeling of like, I just can't wait to get moving into this, like, I guess, challenge or whatever it may be. Like, because I just know every time I go out, I learn so much from it, and just the adventure of getting somewhere to get to the other side or get back or whatever it is, from one point to another, and have all that in between has always been something that keeps drawing me towards it.
All right. Well, I think we've dorked out on sailing for enough now. I could keep going, but I can tell Lauren's starting to look around the room.
Not at all. Not at all. John, I read that your favorite surf film is Endless Summer too. And I never heard anyone else reference the sequel as a favorite. Can you tell us why that movie?
Endless Summer 2 was just one of the ones that I watched growing up. Like, it was just, I don't know. Me and my brothers watched it literally every single night and just absolutely loved it. We loved the story, just everything about it. And so just growing up, it was one of my favorite movies of all time.
That's great. I read this book earlier in the year. It's called Tupaya. Lauren found it and got it sent to us. And it's about Tupaya, who's a Tahitian man who was with Captain Cook, who came through the Pacific and came to Australia. And his experience of being a traditional wayfinder, Polynesian, a Tahitian priest and a wayfinder, and then being on board the Endeavour, which is one of the big European tall ships, and sailing through the Pacific, getting to New Zealand, coming to Australia. They went along the Barrier Reef. Just crazy adventures. But the thing that's really interesting with his story is that experience of him leaving Tahiti and literally being with these pretty much alien species of these Europeans operating a completely different worldview, using completely different technology, and then landing in all these island cultures and these different locations and needing to interact with new cultures. And it's a fascinating story of these, I guess, worlds mixing and these worldviews and approaches to moving throughout the Pacific in such different ways. And it made me curious just now thinking about your experience in Hawaii there and that line of indigenous wisdom and, modern times and the reviving of Hawaiian culture that's been happening for decades now in Hawaii, and language and wayfinding and the voyaging society and all of that. What's your take on that? Is that something you're interested in? Is that something that's part of life there quite consistently, that revitalization?
For me, I think I'm inspired by it for sure. And I think what Nainoa Thompson and those guys have been doing and have done in the recent years is incredible. For me, though, that's like one of the bigger inspirations, just to see what they can do with, I guess, keeping it so simple in a way. I guess, I don't know if it's simple, but just with nothing, like, and knowing the ocean so well and knowing where you are. And we, on one of our trip we did a few years ago, Eric got one of the Hokulea handbooks and brought it with us. And so just kind of flipping through that and getting an idea of how they kind of position themselves and how they use their wayfinding system. It's so interesting. And we did a trip from here to the Line Islands. And so you're 500 miles from the closest land, and you're just like in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, pretty much just in the middle. And looking in both directions, it must have been the craziest thing to be able to know based off the stars, using the wind, the current, the cloud systems, everything basing on that, and getting your way from Tahiti up to Hawaii and around the world at what they did a few years ago. So I just look at it and am in awe about what those guys have done.
Yeah, it's incredible. And that it's stretching out through the Pacific, and lots of other nations have recreated their double hull sailing and voyaging canoes.
Yeah, and I think it's great because it inspires bringing culture back. I think it's so cool in that sense. It's such a good point of inspiration, doing this thing that, I mean, people may have not even known was possible.
Speaking of culture, I was curious to know if you feel like there's been a shift in surf culture or your community there in Hawaii these days compared to when you were a little grom. If there have been any changes just sort of culturally that are more positive or maybe not so positive there. For example, like here in Australia, I've been joking with a lot of crew lately about how when I was a kid in the late 90s, surfing anything other than a pointy nose thruster, you'd get tied up in the trees at the point breaks by the older guys and like, you know, ridiculed for doing something different. Whereas now, kids are just riding anything and are just so much more open-minded. The world's so much more accepting of difference now, and it's really positive. Have you noticed anything like that in Hawaii? Do you feel like there's been changes like that culturally?
Yeah, I would say so for sure. I think it's like exactly what you said, people being able to ride kind of whatever they want, whenever they want, and surfing in all different types of ways, and it being respected. And same goes for bodyboarding and body surfing, like all these different sports in the ocean just being equally respected. It's an interesting change, though, I think, with social media. Since I was younger, like when I was younger, social media wasn't the biggest thing. And now it seems like it's the biggest thing. So you have all these kids, and I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing yet, but everyone's so wrapped up in trying to get their air or their turn for that day. You know, it's not like you're working on a project with someone or you're just surfing for the fun of it. It's like every single piece of it is wrapped up for that social media aspect of it. At least that's what you see a lot here. And
what's wrong with that? Do you think there's something wrong with that? Do you think that's
that's what I'm saying. I don't know if there's something wrong with it or not. Just that it's hard for me to talk because we film a lot.
But I specifically, though, does the experience of being watched change the way you approach riding waves?
Definitely. For me, it's like being watched, like if I'm not being filmed, then I'm just surfing for fun. I will stand up on a wave and I'll double hand drag the entire wave all the way to the beach.
And I think that's the same for all of us. We dance like someone's watching because someone's watching.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I just don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I think it's amazing in the sense that it allows a lot of opportunity for so many different types of surfers. I think that is incredible. Like, you don't have to go on the tour. You don't have to be in someone else's movies. Like you can be a surfer on your own terms type of thing, which I think is really kind of amazing on that side of it. But the other side of it is just, someone's always watching.
And for those of us who are introverts, who get our energy by introvert, for me, that kind of means I feel most rested and rejuvenated when I'm by myself. I find groups of people, and like you were saying before, small talk can be really exhausting and draining. So like for the introverts of us, I think it definitely is a major drain to feel like, you're being observed or having to perform in some way. Yeah, exactly. And here there's just, I feel like every time you go surfing, there's just always people filming and always stuff going on. And I don't think it's bad or good. I just thought it's just different than when I was younger. I feel like when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, we were just surfing just to go surfing because we just wanted to go surfing the sandbar and just absolutely loved it. Not necessarily to go get a clip for Instagram or something like that. So yeah, it's just different.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a fine line with it in the same way where there is with the tools of technology now, where it's like using a phone to connect with your friends or family or organize something is great, but then, you know, staring at the thing all the time is obviously not so great, and trying to dance that line is tricky.
Yeah, and sometimes I think maybe in a certain way, kids looking for like validation through it is maybe not the healthiest thing, whether it's surfing or anything else in life. Yeah, I'm
curious to just maybe help kids who are watching themselves surf all the time to feel okay about watching themselves and beating themselves up. Do you watch footage of yourself and go, oh man, like what am I? Do you ever cringe when you see a shot of yourself and go, God, what am I thinking? Look at that stance or whatever. Does that happen?
Definitely, yeah.
It does?
Yeah. That, you know, how it always feels so much better than it looks. Or
that's what I was going to say. I have so many waves where I'm like, that felt really cool. And then I watch the clip, I'm like, that wasn't it. That wasn't that one. You're just like denying it to the end. But yeah, that happens to me all the time.
Okay, that's good. Well, I think that's a good thing for kids to hear, because I remember when I was a little grom, I was with Brendan Margison Margot, who was like one of the first free surfers, you know, who never competed, and just a freakishly great surfer, but a very different style. I don't know if you've watched pictures of him surfing, but
yes,
amazing surfer, but very different to everyone else. And when this is showing how old I am, when someone came along with a video camera and videoed some surfing one day and then hooked it up to a television set in a caravan park and showed us the footage of that day for the first time ever. Brendan and Occy were there, and Luke Egan, and they were all just like, cringing. Like they were cringing watching themselves. And I was like,
that's so funny.
I think I was 14 and they're my heroes, and I'm watching them just beat themselves up over how they held their arm, or their feet were too close together or whatever, you know. And then I saw a picture of myself and I did exactly the same. I probably cried myself to sleep that night when I went to bed. And it was just intense. It was an intense thing to see. And so anyway, it does make me think that it's really good for all of us who might be looked at as, you know, a surfer to, I don't know, admire or respect or whatever, that we all actually beat ourselves up too, and can be silly and harsh on ourselves, and to lighten it up a little bit and not take it too seriously is really important, because there is a lot of stressed kids, a lot of stressed people who are feeling anxious because of seeing themselves all the time.
Yes.
John, what is the next 6 months look like for you? What are you dreaming up?
Well, my mind has been going all over the place, and it's been really funny, but been going back and forth from I'm not doing the tour, I'm going sailing around the world, to I'm doing the tour. But lately I've just been kind of on this mindset of like just loving surfing altogether. And I'm pretty excited to kind of start like getting ready for the tour next year and go into it with that mindset. I feel like that's a really fun mindset to go into it with, and just really just enjoy it and kind of see how that goes. And that's why I like competing, because it's like a big giant test every time. Like you just play with these little, you like finely tune things, change your mindset a little bit and see how it goes. And it's good. It's a good testing ground.
You've spoken so much about how much you love surfing, which is so beautiful. But does the game of competitive surfing, or like the pressure of making your livelihood out of surfing, does it ever feel complicated for you? Does it ever complicate the surfing experience for you?
Definitely. It definitely does. Like my experience this last year was super complicated and hard for me to wrap my mind around, because I don't know if I necessarily wanted to be there at the time. And in the last couple of years, it's kind of been the feeling. But I think that it's just, I was blaming surfing in a way for making me feel bad. I don't know. It's just like I'm doing it too much and I'm competing too much, and I don't really want to be here competing, but I think there was a lot of other things going on in my life that may have caused that. And I didn't really like open up to those things at the same time. So now I'm kind of trying to be a little more open and be a little more just like, okay, no. Even when I'm super down, I surf like the waves are average, I'll surf for like 6 hours. And I'm just like, I'm just accepting that I just absolutely love being in the water, and it's hard to get me out of the water. And so I'm just kind of going into this year like that. Like I like the challenge of training and getting ready for the events. And for me, it's quite a challenge to get into the competitive mode, because like I just like free surfing and going really fast on the line and not thinking, and being able to surf for 5 hours. And so 4.5 hours of my session might be really bad, but I'll get half an hour of good waves. And in a contest, it's not like that. So I enjoy that challenge. For me, it's hard to kind of get into that mindset and figure out what routine is going to help me to get there, and what process helps me get into that mindset. So that's definitely what I enjoy about it and what I'm looking forward to.
Thanks to John for taking an hour out of his surf day to talk story with us. Many thanks to our sound engineer and editor, Shannon Soul Carroll. The podcast soundtracks are also composed by Shannon, with additional music by Band of Frequencies. On behalf of myself, Lauren Hill, and my partner in rhyme, Dave Rastovich, thanks for making the time to listen with us today. If you have a spare moment, please consider leaving a review of the podcast or sharing an episode with a friend. Both help us to find the best stories from our global community of water people. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast. You can find every episode and some extras on our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com.